HRV is a wonderful indicator to take a look at how your everyday lifestyle choices are impacting your nervous system.
People see this number and they start to obsess over it, and it creates chronic stress, worrying about the number. Go ahead.
I wanted to pause you for a quick second because you said a bunch of things that I had like light bulbs. First of all,
you can't fix HRV without fixing sleep.
Welcome everybody to 90% Healthy Podcast. This is such an exciting venture for both Don and I. So we are going to dive right in because if you've listened to the trailer, you know what this is about. And we have a lot to discuss because we are going to jump into heart rate variability today. That is a very buzzing topic in the health and wellness industry. And yet a lot of people don't know what it is, don't know how to use it, don't know how to interpret it, and chase the wrong things. So, right. Don, dive in. What is it and why should we care about it?
Well, let's climb up out of the rabbit hole just a little bit and go up to 30,000 feet and look down just a little bit. Why do we care? Well, I mean, why should you care about heart rate variability and what's it mean? And a lot of this backs up to, you know, listen, at the end of the day, I have this definition of fitness, and it's my definition of fitness is the physical capacity to enjoy the life you're given. You know, it's not about a certain body fat level or a certain number on a scale or things like that. It's about what I call life events, trainable life events. It's about your next vacation or the wedding that's coming up, or, you know, listen, you and I are in two different phases of our life. I like to describe life in three phases. We spend our first third learning. We spend our second third earning or in service to others. And then our third is our third. It's when I'm not working for anybody else. You know, you're kind of beginning your second third right now. You know, you're early on. Yeah. I'm beginning my third. You know, my daughter now is close to your age. I'm assuming she's 27. She moved out a couple years ago. My wife and I started this adventure, but it's just about her and I now. So the challenge is, you know, I was talking to a guy day before yesterday on the phone, and he said we're both I'm in my early 60s. I turned 63 on my next birthday, and he said, I want to feel like I did when I was 30. And I said, that's interesting. I said, you know, I feel really good. I feel really good about where I'm at right now. And I said, I want to feel this way when I'm 90. So The perspective was interesting. So, you know, to kind of go full circle, why do we care? What is fitness? Well, when I'm 90, I got to go skiing this winter again with my daughter. We skied heavenly up in Lake Tahoe. I thought that was really cool because I would have never been able to do that with my father or mother. And I want to be skiing with my grandkids. I want to be coaching them. So fitness for me is about training for life events, as we move forward. And so with that in mind, heart rate variability is this very high level indicator that you can look at. Am I moving forward? What we know about heart rate variability is that when it's zero, you're dead. Okay. When it comes right down to it. And I've had the experience of working with some amazing athletes, some kids that are arguably the most fit, on the face of the earth. And they have HRVs greater than 100, 150, 170. Yeah. And we figured out for wrestling, if you want to make All-American, you've got to have an HRV going in the tournament greater than 75. Now, as we look at this is just this number that we can look at on a daily basis that tells us, hey, are we moving? I always want to be moving away from death, right? I always want to be pushing that up. So am I moving away from death towards Olympic status? Or am I moving the other direction? And this is, it's a measurement of stress. It's a measurement of stress management. And we know that stress is just so toxic for us. And it challenges that fundamental principle of fitness, the physical capacity to enjoy the life you're given. And so that's why HRV is important, and that's why we should be talking about it.
And I 100% agree, because although, yes, stress is putting a lot of strain onto our bodies, to an extent, when we're talking about hormetic stressors, it does make us a little bit more resilient. And HRV is a wonderful indicator to take a look at how your everyday lifestyle choices are impacting your nervous system. Are you
Right.
overly straining it? Or is your nervous system able to adapt and become stronger?
Right.
And HRV is this mirror metric that allows us to put an objective data behind how subjectively we may be feeling. And it can be around getting stronger, achieving a physical goal, or perhaps getting sick or getting burnt out. There's a lot of indications behind HRV other than just the measure of variation in time between heartbeats.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And our challenges, and you made a statement there that was interesting, is does it reflect how we feel? Listen, we have a lot of really good data that shows you may feel okay, but something else is going on. And so you want to pay attention to that, number one. But number two is that you talked about different kinds of stress. And I think this is really important, that regardless of who you are, there's stress. There's always things that are challenging you in the world. And we want to separate acute eustress, when I decide to exercise and expose my body to a stress and then have it recover, versus chronic stress. Okay, these chronic stressors. And again, HRV gives us an indicator. If we're doing a good job of managing that, we build resources, we build resilience, and if we're doing that, we have the substrate necessary to deal with new stresses coming on. And so it's about that difference between chronic stress and acute stress. And acute stress can be very, very healthy, but chronic stress rarely is. And you've got to be able to manage that. And HRV just gives you a good feedback on, do you have the resources necessary, and have you built the resilience so that you can deal with when life comes at you?
100%. And I just want to kind of segue into a little bit about this obsession that has built up in the industry, because a lot of the wearables nowadays are tracking HRV, perhaps with a few differences here and there. But people have become really aware that this is something they should be looking at. And when we become really aware of something, we tend to begin to obsess over it. I mean, guilty at charge.
Right.
Ever since I started tracking my HRV, as much as I'm in my mid-30s, it should be higher. My baseline is in the mid-30s as well. Look at my brother, who's a few years younger than me. His HRV is up in the hundreds.
Right.
And I generally consider myself a very healthy individual. I pay attention to a lot of those pillars that are important to leading a healthy life and potentially become better over time. So that low HRV has always bugged me so much, and I just wanted to do everything and anything to increase my HRV, and I wanted to be in the 60s and the 80s. Never happened unless I did like an extended fast, but even then it's just very acute. So I would love to go into a little bit into how people develop this orthorexia, where we're so obsessing over this number and this data, where it really could be putting more stress on our body because we obsess over it, as opposed to focusing on the right thing, which is to be stable.
Yeah, and again, so let's separate the numbers from reality, from operationalize that. And you're right. Listen, so if you've never heard of HRV, this is it's called heart rate variability, and it's becoming popular through wearable technology. So in the last decade, we've had this explosion of wearable tech, whether it's rings or bracelets or heart rate transmitters that are able to measure HRV. And when we measure HRV, what we're doing is we're measuring your heart rate. So the number of beats per minute is heart rate. But when we look at the time between the beats, if you have high HRV, those times are variable. That's where the term variable comes from. So instead of your heartbeat being beep, 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 high HRV sounds like beep, 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 beep. It varies. There's lots of variability. It's not long, it's not short, it's all of those. So, and when we know we have high HRV, what we know is that the body is recovered. It has the resources necessary to deal with stress, necessary to deal with that next impact. And you're exactly right. People see this number and they start to obsess over it, and it creates chronic stress, worrying about the number, rather than saying, okay, that's what it is. Let's make an adjustment and move on. Or, I like to, it's confirmation bias. One of the biggest challenges that we have in our society is we just look for things that confirm our belief. Well, there's a lot of people that think, oh, I'm doing great, I'm healthy. And they get their whatever their device is, and they get a reading, and their HRV is 17.
It's so disappointing when the data looks.
It shouldn't be disappointing. It should be raising your awareness. It should be, listen, you're the same person you were the minute before you saw that number. So don't ever forget that, okay? Yeah. And all it is just saying, hey, as you look at the map, there might be a better route, okay? There might, you've been going through your life, you've been driving the same route to wherever you're going, metaphorically. And this is just saying, this is kind of Google Maps for your nervous system, saying, hey, there might be a better route. You might want to try this way. Yeah. And that's where we start to use tools to change our stress response system, to build resilience, to do those kinds of things. And you're right. Listen, if you're a wrestler trying to make the NCAA tournament and trying to be an All-American, there's probably a reason to chase the number. There's probably a reason to say, you know what, we've got data that says if you're not above 75 milliseconds, you won't make All-American. So you make the decision, okay, I'm training hard, but maybe I need to invest in recovery now. Yeah. Maybe I have intentional training. Maybe I need intentional recovery. And then start to take, and I'll tell you, Klaudia, this was a lot for me when I started. I was not, as an athlete a long time ago, I was dealing with the challenge of I was anxiety before a match, and it actually affected me dramatically. And going into my last year of wrestling, I worked with a sports psychologist that helped me change my mindset from where I was competing to where I started performing, which was a huge mindset shift for me. But I also started doing visualization meditation, which is, and now the meditation that we're teaching today is what we were doing 35, 40 years ago, but we've given it a different name.
Way ahead of your time, or ahead of
a lot of people, and all it did was help me manage my anxiety. Okay. Yeah. Because we were able to link my anxious response to my losses. So this is a long time ago. So, and for me, this was pretty woo-woo. Okay. I am not I'm not a jump in to try anything kind of a person. And meditation was kind of a big move for me. Now that I understand it, I'll tell you what I am a big fan of. There's a concept in psychology that's called flow, the psychology of the optimum experience. And I'm a huge flow guy. My ability to focus, get in the point in time, to move away all the things that don't matter and focus on the task at hand. Well, listen, that's all meditation is. Okay. Oh, yeah. It's being present. It's being able to focus on the present and eliminate. And, I have a good friend that was a teammate who said, he said, stress only exists when you're in regret of the past or fear of the future. Okay. Yes. When you're here and present, there is no stress. Well, this is a huge concept in flow. Okay. If you want to get into that place where you're just jamming, I mean, there's not a better physiological space to be than flow. Yeah. Well, meditation helps you do that. It helps you clear the space, get on the playing field and deal with the task at hand. So there's a real alignment between concepts of flow, concepts of recovery, concepts of dealing with stress They go hand in hand, and that's what really brought me on.
And I just wanted to add to that. It was very interesting. Being a Hungarian, it was very cool to see that actual thing flow was spread across this scientific field.
Yep.
Csikszentmihalyi, who's a Hungarian scientist. So I was like,
Right.
I love bringing mind into the world from
There you go.
Our culture. Anyways, talking about the nervous system, you mentioned meditation and stress, and I wanted to highlight one piece of the puzzle that we haven't talked about in terms of HRV, where it's not just the variation of time between your heartbeats, but it really allows people to understand their state of autonomic nervous system. So with having higher HRV tends to show that your parasympathetic, that rest and digest, and the sympathetic, that fight, flight, freeze, is a little bit more in balance. When your HRV is too low and your heart beats at a very static, monotone pace, then you tend to be at a higher stress, higher sympathetic state, where it doesn't give your nervous system the time to recover, to regenerate, and re-energize. And that's what those anxiety and anxious thoughts will lead into. You will trigger that sympathetic response, and you will be in a chronic stress state because your parasympathetic is not being activated. But then you bring in meditation, that flow, your parasympathetic and sympathetic and a lot more in balance. It's this tug of war that is just better when it's pulled equally as opposed to too far in one direction.
Yeah, I'll push back just a little bit there. So when we look at this, is that so for the listener, so you have two sides of your nervous system. You have your motor side. So when I'm talking, when I'm moving, I'm using my motor side. When my arms move, that's my motor side. But my autonomic side, my automatic nervous system side, I don't have to think to breathe. I don't have to think for my heartbeat. I don't have to think for my organs to do their work. So the autonomic system is looking at that automatic side, which is very gets impacted by stress dramatically.
Yes.
So sympathetic, we call that fight or flight. If a lion walks around the corner in the room that you're in, your brain sees that. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that senses fear, says, oh, that's a problem. It sends a signal downstream to the rest of your organs that says, you're probably going to need to start running to stay alive here. So we're going to give you all the resources you need. So there's adrenaline and cortisol and all those stress hormones, which is a good thing. It's really important. It's how we evolved. It's what kept us alive. Now, and normally, if you're out, if it's 5,000 years ago and we're out walking the savannah and we get away from the lion, we climb up into a tree and we chill for a while. Okay, that's parasympathetic kicking in. So sympathetic drops when the lion goes away. Sympathetic drops. Excuse me. Parasympathetic kicks in and we begin to recover. We start to get the hormones of recovery, testosterone, things like that. So we start to build resources and build resiliency. Now, the challenge is today we live in a society where there are paper lions everywhere. We have alarms on our phone. We have alarms on our watches. We have taxes. We have relationships. We have work. We have 24/7 exposure to paper lions or electronic lions or whatever you want to call
everywhere.
it. Yeah, there's a ping everywhere. Now, listen, one of the benefits of when the lion is chasing us, one of the other things our brain gives us is dopamine. It says, hey, not only are we going to give you the resources that you need, but we're going to make you feel good about this because we want you to get out of here, okay? Well, those pings trigger dopamine. Those little things, they trigger that little bit of a happy hormone and there's this tug and pull. So we're creating long-term chronic stress, and we're getting dopamine. We might feel good about it, but the problem is we've got long-term chronic stress and we begin to degrade. And that's when you're going to see the drop in HRV. You can feel good, but not necessarily be doing the right thing for yourself. So this is the challenge that we have. So it's important when we're looking at that, when you make the decision, mark my words, Klaudia, mark my words, in a decade, we're going to start going into our doctors, and instead of them saying not just how do you feel and having put you on the weight and taking your blood pressure, your doctor's going to say, what's your HR? Let me see your HRV records. They want to see what's going on with your stress profile. I said this to my doctor, and I've got a really good functional medicine doctor. And I said, Eric, when are you going to start looking at my HRV data or my CGM data instead of looking at a blood test that you took 3 months ago?
Yeah.
And he says, we're just not ready for that. And I get it. They're not, but I believe this is what's coming. Every indication is this is what's coming. So this is going to become part. The wearables are becoming cheaper and cheaper all the time. They're becoming better and better. They're becoming nearly ubiquitous in society. Almost everyone's wearing an electronic watch of some kind, which has the ability to have sensors on it. So those are coming. So whether it's a ring or a watch or some other device that we don't know about yet, it's coming. And beginning to think about this and think about, okay, what does my life have? I put a note up the other day. I was working with someone. I said, "Our humans like scoreboards." Okay, we start in the crib of putting scoreboards together for us, whether it's grade cards or the universal scoreboard that we have. Nearly everyone drives. On your car, there's a speedometer that you largely don't pay attention to unless there's blue and red lights flashing in your rearview mirror. Then you pay a lot of attention to it. Well, what we're saying here is that if you'll pay attention to that scoreboard of HRV, you may not have to deal with the red and blue lights.
Yeah.
Okay. You can go through life and drive down the road and never be pulled over. And this is the thing that we want to start to take a look at and challenge and help our listeners understand. Don't make decisions based on what that number says this morning. Okay. There's a process that you can put in place. And listen, let's go back to the very beginning. Trainable life events. Okay. The definition of fitness, the physical capacity to enjoy the life we're given. Klaudia, no one takes a picture of their scale and hangs it on the wall. But if you ask 97% of the people, they'll tell you the reason they work out is to lose weight.
Right.
Okay. There's a disconnect between the scoreboard and reality. Okay. So let's start to take a look at what the reality is. What is the event that you're going to take a picture of and put on your wall? What is the 5K run or the 10K run or the vacation or the event? What are you going to take a picture of and put up on your social media and say, okay, this is who I am. This is how I define myself. Yeah. Well, no one's putting a picture of their HRV score or their scale on social media. But we want to be prepared so that when we do go on that vacation and I want to do a long beach hike, or I want to go scuba diving, or if I'm going to be in the mountains, I want to do this awesome hike. It was pretty cool. Not long ago, we were up in Lake Tahoe. We pulled in, and there's a bear in our campsite.
Oh, cool.
It was so cool. And not that we chased the bear, but we sure thought about it. But just the ability to have options to respond to the environment around us. For me, it was really important for me to go ski, and I love to ski. I had a challenge with my health 4 years ago. I had a knee surgery that I've been recovering from, but I got to go ski with my daughter this year. So I was able to work my way back. If that's the trainable life event, if you look at my social media, you're going to see a whole string of pictures from us skiing at Heavenly in Lake Tahoe. I mean, that was a big deal to me. Well, I'm able to get there because I'm using HRV as a leading indicator. It's a tool to say, am I moving forward or not? Do I have the resiliency? Do I have the resources necessary? And you know what? I want to keep working on that number because I want to ski more.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I wanted to pause you for a quick second because you said a bunch of things that I had like light bulbs. First of all, when you talked about dopamine, I definitely want to do an episode on dopamine because that neurotransmitter fascinates me beyond everything. It's insane. And, you talk about training for live events, life events, where it's not something. That's where a lot of people go wrong, including where I went wrong. I started to obsess over the number, and it's almost I'm paying attention to something that's robbing me from being in the present, and enjoying and making my present the most it can. And I think that's why we call this 90% healthy, because we're not obsessing over being 100% perfect all the time, because that will put you in such a prison of limitations and restrictions where you're not going to be enjoying the journey. And if you're not, then going wherever you're going is not even promised. So you might as well be here and do the best you can. And I wanted to segue into a little bit on how to actually look at HRV and how to interpret the data in the right way to look at trends over potential snapshots in one moment in time. So how these trends allow us to make decisions in a way that are meaningful, and I can actually take actions away from it and tweak my lifestyle in a way that's meaningful and doesn't rob me of my present.
Sure. Well, okay, let's just start with the, first of all, you just start by looking at the numbers. Okay, just start by getting a picture. When you get that first number, don't freak out. Again, everyone thinks, oh, I'm doing great, I must be in the 50s or 70s or something like that. Well, I mean, listen, I don't know what the percentage of the people in this country that are on blood pressure medication, but there are two choices on blood pressure. One raises your HRV, one lowers it. So it may be just as simple as saying, oh, I've got an awareness. Maybe mine's pretty low. Maybe the next time I go to my doctor, I ask them about shifting from a beta blocker to an ACE inhibitor. Because just that move right there will raise your HRV. And so medications can be a big part of this. And we know how many people use medications, and I'm not beating on it, just there's impact of all these things. There's a good and a bad.
Yeah.
So it's just a number, number one. Number two, if that number's low in your mind, sit back to yourself and say, you know what? This is the trigger I need to start to make some changes. I'm going to start to do some things in my life with the idea of being able to have more resiliency, to recover better, to do this. Number one, you cannot change this number without changing your exercise habits. Okay. So as you become more fit, there's more time between heartbeats. So, and we'll talk about VO2 and O2 utilization. We'll talk about this in other podcasts. But as my fitness improves on VO2, there'll be more space, there'll be more opportunity for high variability. Number one. Number two, if you are missing a nutrient, if there's something in your diet that's not being fed, it'll affect your HRV. Your body is going to go, there's a sense of sympathetic need to go eat, and it's going to send you searching from that. You can't fix HRV without fixing sleep. Okay. So you've got to take a hard look at your sleep environment. Okay. And then finally, you've got to establish this cycle. The body loves to be in a cycle. Okay. So we call it the circadian rhythm. It starts by establishing sunlight in your eyes in the morning. Okay. This is really important. So, and this goes back to my 4 rocks in the jar of health and performance. Exercise, movement, you hack it with exercise. Nutrient-dense food, you hack it with supplements. You can't hack sleep. You can hack the sleep environment, but you've got to get good sleep. And then finally, getting light. There are nutritive lights and there are toxic lights. Okay, just like there are nutritive foods and there are toxic foods. So look at that number and say, okay, I'm now going to take this seriously. Okay, and begin the process. Okay, begin the process of building resilience, building what you need to have the tools so that when there is a challenge, you've got the resources on board to deal with it. That's where it really starts. And then it's never ending. Okay.
Yeah.
This is just an indicator as we go. HRV drops with age. We know this. Okay. But it doesn't have to drop as rapidly. When we take a look at the process, we can engage. It's more important to do some of these things as we age than it is when we're young. And again, like I said, you're moving into second third of your life, and I'm moving into third, but we both have that same challenge of okay, what do we want to do? What is that trainable life event that we're working towards? How am I building my fitness so I have the physical capacity to enjoy the life I'm given? This is our challenge, what we want to move into.
And HRV is also an indicator of a lot of wearables are starting to give you the red flags of, hey, you may be getting signs of overstraining, which it could manifest as you've gotten, you've caught a cold or you're coming down with something, which I've noticed firsthand just recently when I caught a cold as I was traveling, and my body temperature was elevated way beyond what it usually is at night. And my resting heart rate was also high, and my HRV was down in the single digits. So my body was obviously going through something and fighting some type of pathogen, and it shows up in your HRV. But again, you have to be vigilant in understanding, what have I done that may have caused this outcome, as opposed to jumping to conclusions right away. And I think that's where often people fall in the trap of wake up having a low HRV and it's the end of the world. I'm just going to sit around and not do anything. Where it's not exactly the case. Like, you have to take it all with a grain of salt and understand, what have I done? Did I have a late night meal that potentially may have kept my HRV down lower?
And it might not even, if that late night move include alcohol, the answer is yes.
Definitely.
Okay, so
yes.
I know you have experienced this, but all my friends that have started using HRV are on me. They're like, man, this is really affecting my drinking habits. So yeah, but it may not be anything you did. It just may be life.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember this. We first saw this again when I was working with the wrestling program. You have 10 weight classes that compete, but you're allowed to travel with 16 guys because you got to have workout partners and things like that on the road. And we were picking the extra 6, and I said, we're going to need someone else at 57. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, no, well, so-and-so this morning started showing signs. I think he's probably going to show flu symptoms in 2 days. And they're like, how do you know that? I'm like, well, I'm looking at his physiological data, and his HRV went down, everything. It's like, well, 2 days later, he's got the sniffles, he's got the flu, and we're having to put the other guy in that weight class. So you listen, you can see this physiologically before it expresses itself with noticeable symptoms. And that's kind of a nice little benefit.
Yeah, it is very cool. I mean, I 100% have taken advantage of that. And then also, I wanted to point out one more thing from a female perspective, whereas especially cycling women will fluctuate depending on what phase of their cycle they're in. I definitely see my HRV trending slightly lower in the second half in my luteal phase, and slightly higher during my follicular ovulatory phase, because my body is just much more resilient to take on stress.
Absolutely.
And bounce back. So things that you need to pay attention to, do not compare. And also something that I felt guilty of when I first started tracking is comparing HRV to another person, even if they were the same age as me. And it's not something you should be doing, because it's such an individualized number. It doesn't have a set range of healthy, not healthy. Ideally higher obviously shows better resilience, but it is something you want to track and compare to yourself. And even there are deviations between devices. So if you're wearing a ring, if you're wearing a wristband, if you're wearing any type of different brand, they will have variation in how they show you your HRV. So it's always important to compare to yourself and compare the data to the same device all the time instead of to each other.
And let's be clear, there are devices on the market that I do not recommend. Okay.
Oh, for sure.
It's the equivalent of going to the store, buying a scale, and you step on the scale and it says, you weigh between 50 and 1,000 pounds. It gives you a number, but the number is meaningless, it's valueless. And so there's a lot of devices on the market that have that same impact. So it's certainly a buyer beware. You want to make sure and deal with a top process. And you can always reach out to us. If you have questions, you can always reach out to us and we'll give you a little bit of feedback there.
Yes, 100%. And I kind of wanted to wrap things up a little bit because I know we're coming to the end. And I would love to pick your brain in what are some of 4 to 5 takeaways, 1% shifts that somebody who wants to or already are tracking HRV take away in a meaningful way that they can, perhaps something they shouldn't do with it, and a few other things that they should do with it in order to really be prepared for those life events that are coming down the road.
We've really talked about it. So, listen, we've talked about don't obsess over the number, don't chase the number, but set a goal, set an event. Okay. Again, that a 5K, a wedding, something on the future said you want to be in better shape for, you want to be more fit for, so you can take full advantage of, and then put together a program that you're working towards that. Then you use HR and HRV as a feedback tool. Am I moving towards that? But no, along the way, you're going to get a cold. You're going to get, there's going to be there's going to be something. Okay. Be able to respond to that and recover. So get a plan in place. Don't wake up that morning and make your decision as to what you're doing based on what the number is that day. Number one. Number two, go back to the rocks in the jar. And we'll put a link to a talk that I do on this rocks in the jar. If you don't walk, start walking. If you walk, start doing a little bit more. If your strength training is very important, particularly, listen, strength training is really important in all thirds of your life. We tend to really invest in it in the first and in the beginning of the second third. The third third of your life is the most important time to lift weights. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And then look at the nutrient-dense food, look at your sleep quality, look at what's going on with your light diet. Make sure I'm getting nutritive, good light in. I'm cutting down on the toxic bad light. But have a goal, have a program, have a process that's moving you towards that better life event that you're going to put the picture on the wall or going to hang something on social media with.
Awesome. And I would just add one more thing. Find something that will put you in the flow.
In flow, yeah.
Yes.
We should do an episode on flow. Maybe we get my friend Stephen Kotler to come join us.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, it's I mean, even having conversations like this puts your mind often in the flow because you're just so focused and in the present and nothing else really matters.
Exactly.
Although sometimes I do look at my notes.
That's all right.
Okay. Thanks, Don. Did we miss anything?
I don't. Well, if we did, we'll cover it. This is episode 1, ladies and gentlemen.
Give us some slack.
It's episode 1. Stick with us. We're going to continue to do this in 90% Healthy, and hopefully we help you move the needle towards you achieving your life goals as well.
Yeah, just 1% shifts at a time. They make a big difference. Thanks for watching, listening, wherever you find your podcast, wherever you listen to us, whether it's YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. And leave us a comment, leave us a note, leave us a review. We are always eager to hear from you and interact and connect. So keep us posted, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.